Welcome to my YouTube video today. This video is going to be an unboxing video of the EK-FC7970 CSQ waterblock, the EK-CSQ backplate, and it's going to be a review of the HD7970 Radeon graphics card from AMD, looking at the PCB of it, and how to install the waterblock on the card with the disassembly of the card prior to that. So this waterblock comes with all required thermal pads, tools, screws. It even comes with TIM, thermal paste. It's got a very thorough instruction. Just be sure to read through that. Now, the waterblock itself, I ordered a Acetal+Nickel edition. It comes with the EK-FC system, which allows to install multiple blocks in a system, and this waterblock fully cools your memory chips, your GPU, your PCI Express, and memory and GPU VRM sets. It's a full 3D flow design, kind of, if you want to call it that. It features the acetal front with in and outlet, or you can use whatever you want as in and outlets. And it's got the nickel plate on top for the 3D flow through the VRMs back to the out. Next, we're gonna take a look at the backplate. This is a full metal backplate. It's made out of aluminum. It's anodized black. It comes with its own instruction set, and it passively cools the rear side of the VRMs, and comes with 2 sets of thermal pads that are required, and the specific screws and a tool required to install that. Same with the instruction. Just read through it, make sure you understand it. And now let's have a look at the waterblock with the backplate, what it's gonna look like. A little close up. So now we're going to start the disassembly process of the VTX3D graphics card. I'm using Phillips screwdrivers, the small one that I've used all the time, and an additional flathead, which seems to be needed for the VTX. So this model is a 2-fan card. It's still full reference design with a custom fan. Let's flip it over and look at the back side. On this model we only have 4 screws that hold the heatsink assembly. So let's just undo this one for now. I always do cross patterns with loosening and tightening. So we'll put these 4 screws aside. Okay, now there don't seem to be any screws left, so let's try and lift off the heatsink and disconnect the fan. Just over here. Okay, and then we're done with the disassembly of the heatsink. Let's put this aside and look at the card. So, on this card, I'll put up a larger picture later. This one is a full reference design. We have the 12 memory modules around the GPU. There's a VRM up here for the PCI Express and a coil, and underneath this heatsink, which we still need to disassemble, is the full set of the VRMs for the memory and the GPU. So let's turn it over and look how this one's mounted. And this is just these plastic clips Now I'll see if I can just pinch them to get open. Okay, this worked. And this worked too. So flip it over. And let's get this one off. Okay. There we go. This is the assembly. Let's put this aside. And here we still have the thermal pad on, which I'll remove since the water plug has a different size. You could actually still use this one and see. No, not anymore. I ripped it. So I'll show you a few tricks on how to clean these graphics cards. Okay, now this one's clean. Okay, now one specialty about this one is AMD actually presented this design in their presentation video, which features the, I think it's 7th, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this one's additional to 7th, which is an additional VRM phase for the GPU, which they showed in the demonstration video, which was still computer animated, but all the sold boards lacked this one except for VTX3D and a couple others, mostly gigahertz editions though. So what the water block is going to cool is this VRM over here, the memory modules, the GPU, and the VRMs over here. This is the chill VRM management chip. We got the 6+8 pins over here. Fan connector is not going to be used again. So, and this one's a single slot design, which is the reference design, so you can use the optional single slot front plate from EK water blocks. So the backside's clean. Now we'll get to a few tricks on how to clean this one, and I'll get it cleaned. So what I always do is using a little brush, rather medium softness, to scrape this stuff off here since it's pretty dried up. It works very well. Just be very careful, kind of like an archaeologist. Make sure you get all these things off like this, and I'll continue the rest. And over here where you have the residue of the thermal pads, just scrape along so you get that off, and make sure that's all clean, and I'll get that cleaned. I'll be back later. Okay, now we get into the fun part of this video, installing the water block. So most work is going to be cutting this sheet of thermal pads for the memory and for this VRM section. The second part is this little thicker pad right here, which goes onto this VRM section over here. So that's going to take most of the time. Always be sure to read the manual. Just read it over and over again so you don't screw it up. It says right here to install the 0.5mm sections for the memory and the VRM driver and MOSFET ICs. The 1mm is the one over here, which is for the number 3 down there. So make sure it's cleaned properly, which I've already done. And then we can get started. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the this pad right here with the width of the IC and of the memory chip, and then it's just gonna take time to cut it all. So there's a little tool. It's let me see if I can do it. Something like this, so you have a mark. And the second side, something like this. And then just get a pair of scissors and cut a couple stripes, place them on the memory modules. There's one thing I like doing with other water blocks, but you can't do on this one, is since the memory cooler right here is a full long block, it wouldn't work, but on this one right here, I usually just put the VRM pads on here and cut it around the shape, which wouldn't work over here since we have much more area on the water block than we have memory modules. So let me just get that stuff cut up and I'll get back with you. Okay, now I've cut all the memory pads right here, and we're just going to start off installing one, and I'm going to do the rest on my own since it's a little complicated from the camera. Okay, so what I usually do is take off the thicker side, try not to touch most of it, and then place it on a little X-Acto knife. Remove the thinner side. Okay, try not to touch it. So then I'm going to make sure I install this one exactly as I can and see if that covered the memory module. Okay, so that's how I install those, and I'll be back in a little bit when I got all of them done. And the last one, the thick pad, we're going to install that on the water block along with the thicker one over there. Okay, so I just finished putting all the memory module pads on, all 12 of them. I tried to be as exact as possible, and one tip, just be very careful, do it slow, take your time, don't stretch the pads so nothing will happen. So next step is to install the VRM pads, but I'm going to do that on the water block itself. So put the graphics card aside, let's get out the water block. And like this. So same here, proper cleaning is half the rent. Okay, now this is the rest of the small one, and we're gonna need to split it in two since it's not long enough. So what I'm going to do here is a little different. I'm going to open up the memory pad on this side and that side as well. So, oops, a little complicated though. Let me get that. Okay, now I have the pad right here, and I'm going to put this one on this section right here. Let's sit over it a little bit. Just use a knife and cut along that side. And you can always adjust it later with better. Okay, there we go. It's kind of like this. And then put the next one at the end of it. I'll just cut it off for now, so you can use the rest sometime later. Okay, now let me get this one straightened out and I'll show it to you. Okay, now here we go. This is all neat and installed. Now this little section right here is left. So I'll do this one and I'll be back in a second. Alright, now this one is installed. These are installed. All protective plastics removed. Be sure to check that. And the memory modules are installed. Now the only thing that's left is the GPU plug itself. So what I'm gonna do is EK always supplies TIM with it now with the latest plugs. So you're set on that side already. And this is supposed to be really good stuff too, so no problem using that. And what I'm gonna do is a little technique that I've developed in the past is to use just simple thin plastic foil. Cleaning is important again. So I'm gonna go over that. It's a microfiber cloth thing that I'm using. I'm gonna do the same with the memory block part. Remove all the grease from my fingers. And now I'm gonna put some of that TIM stuff on here, just a tiny little bit, so I can spread it out. And then I'm gonna use the plastic foil, put it around my finger, and just spread stuff out a little bit. And so we have a good connection that's evenly spread on the block. And keep in mind the block's a little bigger than the chip itself, so we don't need to do full corners on that one. Yeah, it looks good to me. And now I'll put that aside. And on this one, we're going to do the same. We're going to put some TIM on the chip and evenly spread it out. And I'll do that and get back. Alright, here we go. Graphics card is ready for the water block. These sections are cooled with the pads that are on the block. Memory pads are all on. GPU is good. This block's good. And one little trick that I do is now that I've spread both sides, I'm going to do a very little blob on top in the middle, so that it has something to spread and remove all the air. Just a very little tiny blob. I like this. Might already a little bit on the big side. So let's put the cap on that stuff back on. And here's what I'm doing, again, different than most people are showing you. I'm not putting the block on the graphics card, but I'm putting the graphics card on the block. So let me move that stuff over and get out a little box that I can use. And you're not supposed to read that. Okay, so here's the block. And let me adjust the camera. Okay, focus read and camera readjusted. So now we got the graphics card is all ready to get mounted. I'm gonna flip it over and then align the 4 main screws perfectly with the water plug. Hang on, I'm gonna move the foam over a little bit so it's not gonna be in the way. Okay, so it's going to get mounted like this. We're going to do it very carefully and slowly on the 4 screw holes. Okay, kind of like that. Let me make sure I did get all other screws perfectly aligned as well. And this is good. These are all looking good. Okay, now the next step is getting out the screws and tightening the 4 main screws first. So we get some little plastic washers. Okay, that might not be, actually, hang on. I do need to remove those first. Let me see if I can do that. Well, guess what, can I just reuse them? Yeah, I'll just reuse those. They're good. Because if I mess around with that now, it's probably gonna get screwed up. Okay. So 4 screws, cross patterns, and let's get those tightened up. Check alignment, and I like pushing on the center. Let's do the cross pattern again. Now I'll get these tightened a little bit, making sure the holes are still aligned. Okay, let me get those tightened. Okay, welcome back. Now I've tightened the screws, but actually I did switch out the original washers with the plastic washers that were supplied with the water block. So yeah, I did a little mistake on that. Yeah, you really should read the manual before doing anything. So, since we're going to be using a backplate on that water block, let me get that out right here. There are some special things to that. You're going to make sure you're using all screws on the water block that are not used by the backplate. So these screws right here will be used for the backplate. This one is not. These 2 will be used, so this one and this one will get some screws in now. Next. Okay, let's go ahead and put those ones in. We said it was this one. Then it's this one over here, and this one. So let's make sure we get these ones tightened up first before doing anything else with the water plug and backplate. Okay, tightening those. Just hand tighten them first, and then I'm tightening them up good later. Okay. Let me tighten those. Okay, now you really have to make sure that you tighten those screws, since when putting on the backplate, they are all going to be covered up, so you're not going to be able to retighten those later. Okay, it's going to look like this when it's done. However, the backplate has a feature. It's what we buy it for. I'm going to install thermal pads right here and right here for the VRM modules, and over here for the other stuff. Now, what I'm thinking about doing as well is installing thermal pads on the back side of the memory to cool all those as well. So let me get that done and I'll get back with you in a bit. So here's what I've done. I've first thing, I've installed the thermal pads according to the instruction on the backplate. And I've installed my own 1.5mm thermal pads on the back side of the memory modules. This is not the neatest job, but I need to make sure it's covered all the important parts. And it seems that the 1.5mm is barely enough to cover the gap, but since you've got all these little resistors on the back, it makes sure that it's gonna get squashed in between. So I just hope it works. It's not going to go anywhere, it's not going to fall out or anything, and it might really help the passive cooling of the memory modules from the backside. So what we're going to do now is having a look at the manual just to see if we need to install any washers in between. But nope, does not seem to be needed. So I'm just going to place the backplate on the graphics card. These are installed. Just make sure that the holes are aligned. And that's all I can really do. Oops. Yeah, seems to be perfectly aligned. You can feel along the corner of the graphics PCB as well, so that's a nice help. And yeah, it's gonna get squashed a little bit, but I think it'll work in the end with my own installed things. So now we're gonna need the screws from the back plate. These are these countersunk hex screws. I'll place them in here. Of course, I'm gonna need to tighten them away from the camera to make sure it's all properly tighten and stuff. Get this one a little tighter, and then I'll flip it over to show you. This is what I really like about the EK water blocks. The quality is just perfect and the looks are astonishing. And you can even convert it to a single slot card, which would make sense. So, okay, now this is installed. However, there are last two screws right here. Was it 3? Let me check. It should only be 2 in total. Yes. Okay. Wait, hang on. Did I forget a screw? Yeah. Okay. This is your countersunk screw. This is an additional one they gave you. I'm still gonna use the washers even though they don't say it. But since you're supposed to install the water block with these washers, it's not gonna hurt. I'm on the safe side with no electric conductivity. And we have plenty of those left. Okay, now I'll tighten those later. And this is probably going to be it. The water block is installed. If you decide to use the EK link, I didn't show you that in the unboxing. This right here, you just place it on top. There's 2 O-ring places you put the O-rings in. Just flip it over, install it with the longer screw. You remove this one, use that screw instead, and then you can mount a block on top. It goes like this screw goes up there, and you can install a block then on top to connect 2, 3, or 4 cards if you're using Crossfire, or just to use multiple cards in a water cooling system. Alright, this is going to be it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, subscribe, let me know what you think in the comments, or Just ask any questions. Thank you. And as a little treat for my great YouTubers, I've got a high resolution image of the graphics card. Now on the top left we see both Crossfire X connectors, the dual BIOS switch on top, one VRM phase with its coil for the PCI Express, and the memory chips, which are the Hynix H5GQ2H24 MFR-R0C rated at 1.6 volts for 6000 MHz GDDR5. Now next up is the PCI Express power connectors 6+8 design, the Chill 8228G chip, and all 7 VRM phases in a row, which is a 6+1+1 design for the GPU, 6, 1 for the memory and 1 for the PCI Express, which is the one on the top left. Now last but not least is the Tahiti XT chip, which is a 28 nanometer fab from TSMC, which is the same as the Kepler, features 4.3 billion transistors, 2048 stream processors, 128 texture mapping units, and 32 render output units. A few facts why the HD7970 is the superior graphics card. It has an even and strong performance in DirectX, OpenGL, OpenCL, and Direct Compute. It has a very efficient power design. It has a very good price point at the moment on the used market. It is fully compliant with DirectX 11.0 and 11.1, which means it is fully compliant with DirectX 11.2, Windows 8.1.